Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Online Careers Fair. I'll pass over to Lawrence Tajani to introduce what it is and what we're doing.
Welcome back, guys. This morning was absolutely fantastic, and if you was with us, welcome back again. If this is your first time here, welcome. We've got an exciting range of guests lined up for you this afternoon. Really excited to hear them talk. Some of them I know, some of them it's the first time meeting them, but can't wait. I'm going to go into a few details about the Online Careers Affair and why it's happened. But first of all, I should probably start with my name and who I am. So my name's Lawrence Tajani. I'm the founder of Just a Guy Foundation, and I'm also a director at Happy to Host, which is a web design company. Just want to go into a bit of detail about Just a Guy Foundation. So it actually started out as a blog to document my recovery from a severe epileptic attack, where I had to learn to walk again from it. So I was in hospital for around 6 weeks. But it's now transcended into a foundation that helps disengaged children and also works with people regarding social mobility. But I will get into that in a bit more detail. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself and what your career journey has been, since it's all about careers today?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name's Ben. I sort of left school and did a civil engineering degree, mainly based on the fact that I loved playing with Lego when I was a kid. And then after my degree, I did about a year as a civil engineer. That was flood alleviation schemes and road projects. And one very hot day, I was sweating on a curb drawing and decided that I needed a change. So then after that, became a teacher for about 13 years. And through using technology more and more in the classroom, ended up doing training. And now for the last 2 years, I've been full-time doing professional development for teachers. And then also I facilitate design sprints as well. So a few different things. But the reason that I wanted to support Lawrence with this is I feel that careers options in schools can sometimes lack a bit of variety. So we're really fortunate that Lawrence brought together a real interesting range of people who can tell you about their career journeys. They can tell you that they didn't know what they wanted to be at all for a long period of their lives, and maybe they still don't, and they're still trying to figure that out, and that's okay. So hopefully some of the messages you'll hear will help you not necessarily decide what you want to do, but understand that, pursue the things you're interested in, and it's all going to be okay.
I always forget to mention what my career journey is. I just go in and go, yeah, I'm the founder of this, did Happy to Host. So I was actually a teacher as well for 10 years. And alongside being a teacher, I actually started my business, which was Happy to Host, web design development agency. But I didn't originally want to be a teacher. I had this vision of, being a programmer and going into the city. But things change, and it's all right to pivot in life. And one of the key things I hope you get from today and over the next couple of days, you don't need to know what you want to do now. It's about exploring. And this is why I've put this event together, to find out about different careers. Next slide, please, Ben. So I've touched on it briefly on what Just a Guy Foundation is, but I just would like to go into a bit more detail. Next slide. So we aim to improve the aspirations and education outcomes of young people. We do this through a wide range of activities, so mentoring, workshops, and also one-on-one mentoring. And we help some students, or young people, should I say, make more informed decisions about their lives as well. The core belief is that young people from all backgrounds should have access to networks of advice, support, mentoring, and then this will then help them drive their own social mobility. So this is what I'm really passionate about today. And it only occurred to me to try and arrange something like this. Next slide, please, Ben. Over while I was running. So I was out doing a run, and I thought, how could I give back in this pandemic? What could I do? And I thought, right, let's maybe sort out an online careers fair. Quite a few people. I don't know if I can call them my friends, but I do know a few people. And I thought, right, let's put a group of people together and get them to talk about their experiences and share this, because sometimes we're not able to get access to people like this. So today is about you. Next slide, please, man. So get involved, ask those questions, And this is one of the benefits of potentially doing it this way. You don't have to put your hand up in an assembly in front of your whole year group or anything like that. You can just put your question in the chat. It's about you. Be that unique paperclip. There might be, I've got 100 paper clips in my drawer and they're all silver, but I've got one red paperclip, and that could be you. So be unique and get what you want out today. And you can also ask questions in the link, bit.ly JAG, all capital letters, CFQA. But feel free to get involved in the comments and ask questions. Please, this is all about you today. And we want you to get the most out of this experience. And honestly, some of the speakers we have lined up today are absolutely gonna smash it. Let's just say that, okay? So I think I've spoken enough, but here's a lineup there, right on cue, Ben. We've got Dean Stokes, who's from Google, and he'll talk about his role. We've got Theresa as well. We've got Crystal, who'll be joining us a bit later, and we've got Jack. And there's a lot of people looking forward to Jack. There's been a lot of messages, so no pressure on you, Jack. You've got quite a few people there waiting for your lecture. So that's enough of me and me talking. But I just want to say a big thank you to all these speakers. They've given up their own time during this busy period as well, and I really hope you get something from it.
Here, yeah. I won't spend too long before we get started with Dean and the rest of the speakers. But just to get everyone kind of sharing a few things, I'd like to pose you a little question that you can add your answers in the comments. And just to get you thinking, and then also to get a little bit of information about the audience. So if you knew ahead of time that you wouldn't fail, what challenge or challenges would you take on? Something to have a little think about. And then if you can add, if you've got access to add the comment in, that would be amazing. If you knew ahead of time that you wouldn't fail, what challenges would you take on?
Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot here and get in there first. What would you take on, Ben, while we're just waiting for someone to come in?
Yeah. So I anticipated I would have to answer this myself. And I think obviously there are some huge challenges facing the world, but I'm going to stick with education initially, a field that I've been in for a long time. And I just, myself, I feel that schools could adapt and change a little bit more, maybe in the way that other businesses and industries have around the world. So I definitely like to find a way to work with schools to innovate and change and do things a little bit differently. And that's something that schools haven't necessarily done a lot in the past. So it's definitely a big challenge, but that's probably mine. David is suggesting that he would go for a successful career. Like, out of interest, David, I think you might have mentioned, but you mentioned engineering. Shannon, let's put that in there. So Shannon, she's anti-bullying ambassador. So well done for doing that. I'd like to go to different schools around England and do a workshop activity day fundraiser. Chloe saying that if she knew she wouldn't fail, she'd start up her own business. I think if it's the same Chloe from this morning, then I'm very interested in Meta's nail business as well. I will audition for roles in shows and films because I love drama, but I get nervous when it comes to auditioning. Millie, I think Dean might actually talk a little bit to that about the sort of drama side of things too. It's part of his story. You may not have factored that in. To develop, here's Matthew, to develop my work experience as much as possible. Awesome. So I will pass over to the speakers now, but let me put this to you. All of those things that you are putting forward, suggesting that if you knew you wouldn't fail, that you take them on, why not do them now?
Yeah.
So I will now pass on to the person I've stolen all of that from, which is Dean Stokes. So let me just bring Dean in and say welcome to the Careers Fair, Dean.
Thanks,
Hi,
Ben.
Dean.
Hey, Lawrence. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for being part of this event.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, What we'll do, we'll leave you to it. I might jump in with a few questions as they come up, but over to you, Dean, and we'll catch you in about 10 to 15 minutes with a few questions.
Cool. Thanks, Ben, and hi, everyone. It's always really weird. I do a lot of speaking for my job, but speaking about myself always feels a little bit strange. So as I go through, if you've got any questions, please fire them out into chat. I always feel like being specific about what you want to know is the most helpful. So my name's Dean Stokes. I work at Google. I'm the Education Adoption Manager for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And what that really means is I help make sure schools that have chosen to use Google's tools help make the most of them. So on the next slide, you'll see that it involves a few different things. The first is probably kind of project management. I spend a lot of my time thinking about how we bring in partners, maybe that we work with. Ben works for one, for example, and Lawrence, to help us deliver something for a customer. I spend some of my time managing people. So I have two people that report into me doing different things. One of them looks after education adoption in a specific country. Another looks after events that we run across the whole region that I work across as well. And the last thing I do quite a bit of is public speaking. So speaking to schools, government ministries of education about what Google does for education and how they might benefit from it. So just a quick bit of background. Some of you might have used the thing called G Suite for Education before, or Google Classroom. And that is what my team works on. So I help schools or whole countries or just regions in countries figure out how they're going to use that technology to make the teaching and learning experience better for everyone. So whether that's you as a student in a classroom or in our current environment from home while the teacher is teaching you from home, or maybe even using YouTube for doing live streams like this kind of thing. And so when it comes to adoption as a whole, what that really means is using our products. How do we get more people, more schools, more students, more teachers, more school leaders, and more governments realize that our products are going to help them deliver education and be successful? Thanks, Ben. So I would say that I haven't had a typical journey into the job or career that I find myself in now. I'm going to share some of that with you today. In terms of the studying and training that I've had for this specific role, if you'd asked me when I was back at school, maybe 15, 16, what I would be doing now, I'm 31 now, I wouldn't have said doing the job that I'm doing now. I'm not actually sure what I would have said. I probably would have said something like, I don't know, I'm just going to figure it out. And at that time, I was a driver at Domino's Pizza and became a manager, and more about that in a second. And so actually, I ended up being a bit lazy in school, in all honesty. I wish that I had worked a bit harder. I left school with 7 GCSEs. I stayed on for college and got a couple of A-levels, but I didn't go to university. And so everything that I've picked up between then and now is really just through doing lots of different jobs and roles and odd bits and pieces and finding things that I was passionate about that I wanted to continue with. So in terms of my journey then, how did all this start? How did I get to the point now where I'm, in the morning I might be in a meeting with the Ministry of Education from a particular country, talking to them about success we've seen somewhere else. And in the afternoon, I might just be talking to a head teacher of a primary school in England, giving them a bit of help as well. So the first thing that I really remember doing kind of as a job, if you like, was helping my parents. They had a market stall selling computer games. I still love a bit of gaming, by the way. Quick Google plug. If you haven't checked out Stadia, you should check it out. It's cloud-based gaming. And so that really brought me out of my shell initially. When I was a kid, I was really shy to the point that I couldn't actually look people in the eye even. I'd go around to my nan's house and I would just sit and bury my head in the sofa because I wouldn't want to look at her. And then what that morphed into was actually when I went to school and I got to my GCSEs, I found that I really liked doing the technical side of drama. So I was doing lots of lighting and sound and that kind of thing. And I thought for a while, maybe that's the career that I wanted to go into. And then from there, I was a willing volunteer, kind of actually go and be part of a couple of shows before I left school. And that really helped my confidence. And so that confidence that I found there has definitely helped me kind of as I've gone through these different roles. And honestly, a lot of the time I'm faking it, right? It's just about being brave and standing up and believing that what you're about to say is going to be interesting, helpful to the people that are listening, and ultimately just putting yourself out there and doing something that takes you out of your comfort zone. From the market stall, I ended up working at a place called Megazone, which is like a laser tag arena. So you put the things on and go and shoot other people in the arena. Then I worked at Domino's Pizza, became an assistant manager when I was 19, which was interesting. So I was managing shifts of people, of 40 people were the biggest shifts, and I was the one leading, which looking back now kind of feels crazy. Like I'm surprised that I even did that at that time. And then I was lucky enough to teach in a secondary school for 8.5 years. And I was teaching drama to start with, and then I actually set up the school's media department from scratch, selected the exam board that we were going to use for the course that the students were going to take, and then took that through into a role where I started training teachers on using technology, because we bought the school's first 8 iMacs back then when I did that role. And after I left the school, I ran the business that Ben is now running in the UK called Apps Events. And that was a training company that worked really closely with Google. So it was a Google partner. And then back in 2018, I moved into this full-time role with Google. And so I think when you look at this journey, none of this, you might notice, obviously, was really a plan. Like, I didn't think when I was at Domino's that one day I'm going to be working at Google, helping people use our products and make the most of our products. But it's worked out, and I'm really happy with where I am now. And I feel like the skills that I picked up in all of those jobs have always helped me transfer into the next one and give me the kind of belief that it is possible to go and do this next thing, even though I didn't go to university and I feel like maybe I missed out there and I didn't get the degree that maybe I feel like I should have done at the time.
Hi, Dean. You're probably going to ask for the next slide, but I'm going to, as we talk about not necessarily sticking to the plan or doing the predictable thing.
Yeah, I see lots of questions now that you've stopped me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to pick out a few because we really are getting loads of questions. So Shannon's asked a few. She's actually asked, how did you achieve your role? And was it what you anticipated for your future? So I know a few of them would definitely be keen to hear about how you got the role at Google particularly. And that was a question we had earlier today.
So I think with a lot of things that I've done, there has definitely been some luck involved in kind of being in the right place at the right time, identifying an opportunity when I saw it. But what I would say is that luck was created by the things that I did. And the things that I did usually were networking and just talking to people and getting to know them. So the way that I got into this role in particular was when I was running this training business. And before that, actually, when I was still at the school, I was going around to other schools and training them on how to use Google's tools. Because my school had started using G Suite and Google Classroom. We'd bought some Chromebooks. And that then grew into me getting these certifications that Google does. So I became a Google certified trainer in the education space. And what that led to was one day someone at Google emailing me saying, hey, we've got an event. Can you come along and do some presentations, some training for us? And ultimately that led to me setting up the UK arm of this global business Apps Events. And from there, I had a key contact at Google, and she actually left her role to go into a different job within Google. And so I then applied for her role. I was pretty clear on what it was then. I thought about how I could make my CV kind of steer towards that role. And then I just went through the normal interview process. And so at Google, it's pretty rigorous. You do a minimum of 4 interviews in 4 different areas. And I was lucky enough to get the job.
I think there's a few people who really, I think the bit that really interests everyone is that maybe you haven't, you're not saying went to school, went to university, got a job at Google. There was some interesting stuff in between. If Ben doesn't mind me calling him out, he's particularly keen on what you said so far. We've also had a question, if you're happy to keep these coming at you.
Yeah.
Darren was asking about, does your job involve traveling now? Obviously not at the moment.
Yeah, great question. So actually before the pandemic hit, I travel a lot. And I would say it probably averaged out to once a week I would be going somewhere. Sometimes it would just be around the UK, often around Europe, and on the odd occasion going to the US or beyond. I think travel is one of those things that I feel really lucky to have been able to do for a job. And particularly before this job at Apps Events, where we were training schools globally, I got to go to some amazing places and train people in completely new areas that I wouldn't have ever thought about visiting before. You know, random cities and countries that I'd never had plans to visit. And that is obviously a huge perk of the job, but it always sounds more spectacular than it is. So just to add a bit of realism, what traveling really involves is a lot of sitting at airports, a lot of sitting on planes, and a lot of sitting in hotel rooms. And so quite often you do trips where that is all you do. You go to the place where I have my meeting or I do my training, and then I leave and come back. But on the flip side, there are opportunities sometimes where I can extend a trip and stay a bit longer with some personal time, or in the evenings, we might get to do really cool things. So probably the craziest trip I did where I didn't get to do anything was I went to New Zealand over the space of 4 days, literally flew there, did the training that I was there to do, and then came back to the UK, which in hindsight was insane. I probably shouldn't have done it. More recently, though, like an example of when it has been an amazing experience, I got to go to Abu Dhabi, and I had basically half a day there on my own. So I just went to a theme park on my own, where there's the world's fastest roller coaster. There's an amazing mosque in Abu Dhabi, and I went and visited that as well. So yeah, there is a lot of travel involved in this, but the pandemic has definitely shown that people are more open to doing more meetings online now, where before that in-person relationship felt much more important.
If I may throw one more at you, which I think is probably fair. So Shannon, again, what advice would you give to someone who's looking at a job that involves speaking to people daily, who's very, very shy?
Yeah, I think as with most things, it's just practice. Like I said at the beginning, for me, this is really strange. Talking about myself, I actually find one of the hardest things to do when it comes to public speaking. And yeah, I've done things where the biggest crowd I think I've stood up in front of is like 12,000 people. So I did some charity events for Cancer Research UK. I hosted some Race for Life events, a midnight walk called Shine that started at Battersea Power Station. And if you told me when I was in year 8 or year 9 that one day I'd be stood up in front of 12,000 people at an event, like getting them G'd up and ready to go on a midnight walking marathon, I wouldn't have believed you. And from getting to the point where I couldn't look people in the eye to there was really just pushing myself out of my comfort zone, getting myself to a point where I'm comfortable standing up and doing what I'm doing, even if I get that doubt in my mind that I don't believe that what I've got to say is interesting or what I'm about to do is perfect, just still going out and doing it anyway. And starting small. I think if you can just start with a group of like 3 or 4 people, maybe peers are always harder. Like if they're people that you know, it's always more difficult to present to those crowds. So finding another group, I think someone mentioned about being an anti-bullying ambassador. I think that's a really nice opportunity, for example, to meet some other people and talk to them about something and just be confident hearing your own voice. And then when it actually comes to the speaking part of it, when you are practicing, my biggest piece of advice is just get comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
That pause that I just took there felt to me like an eternity, but to you, it was just a couple of seconds. And being able just to take a moment of silence to kind of gather your thoughts and then carry on is really important. And so on that stage in front of 12,000 people, that's really those moments where I think about it and I realize what's happening, or where I need to just stop and take a breath and put my feet on the ground again and then pick up and carry on. So practice, practice, practice. Start small, and just believe that you can achieve it. Even if in the back of your mind you think you can't, fake it until you make it in a way.
Well, thank you for taking a few of those questions. I know that was appreciated. There's also a lot of questions around dominoes that are coming in that I'll let you pick up on the chat, on the comments yourself. So I interrupted you full flow. If I skip on to next, I think you were going to share your proudest professional achievement to date. So I'll let you.
I can see this really quickly, Ben, before you jump. I'll answer this question from Harry. He said, did you enjoy working at Domino's? And so I started working at Domino's when I was in college. I was at sixth form at my school. And I did really enjoy it, actually. It gave me some It helped me build my skills in talking to people, serving customers, and that customer experience side of it. And then that management part, where I just got thrown into being a junior manager and then an assistant manager of one of the busiest stores in the area. Like, that felt crazy at the time, but all of it was a learning experience. And one of the things that I found about teaching was that to be a teacher, you really need to be a lifelong learner. And so I really consider now that I try to soak up as much stuff as I can, still try to learn new things, take little courses online, read articles, watch a video when I want to. You don't always have to do that. But that whole thing, working at Domino's, was a learning experience. And I did enjoy it for the most part. But the hours, the shifts were really tough. You know, I sacrificed some of my social life at that point of my life for a job. And I don't regret it, because without all of that, I wouldn't be where I am now. But certainly, I probably should have taken it a bit easier than I did then. Cool. Thanks, Ben. Let's jump on to the next one. So in terms of my proudest professional achievement today, there are loads, but one that really sticks out in my mind is when I started this media course at the school, and just seeing all of the students that took that course leave with a pass. That first year that I did it was really heartening. It made me feel vindicated in a way, because maybe some people didn't believe I could do that as someone that I was employed as an unqualified teacher or an instructor. I think perhaps some people thought it wouldn't be possible that I would see that level of success with students in a brand new course that we just introduced to the school with new computers and everything. So that really sticks out in my mind. At Google, we recently launched a website called Teach From Home. You can see it at teachfromhome.google. And when we initially launched that, there was a video of me at the top of that page. And we launched that website in 30 languages. It was promoted on the Google homepage. And so when you click that link, the first thing you saw on that page was my face. So that was also a proud achievement, albeit a little weird. But my mum was happy anyway. So in terms of the skills then, I think if it isn't about qualifications, it's probably about skills. And what skills have I picked up and tried to hone along the way to really fit this job that I'm doing now? And I think it really boils down to these 4 things. Now, there are clearly more, but I would say these 4 skills would be helpful for any kind of job. So the first is problem solving. If you're the kind of person that finds the problems with everything rather than the solutions, then you just need to switch the way you think about things a little bit. If you're speaking to your manager, for example, if you're in a job, it's much better to go to your manager with the problem that you see, an idea for how you might move towards fixing it, and then asking for some advice to maybe build on that and permission to go and do it. So be a problem solver, no matter what your job is, whether you're doing a job in retail right now, you're doing something that's just like filling a gap between where you want to go for your career. Definitely give it your all and think about how you can take ownership of that role that you're in. Take those opportunities that maybe you don't see them, someone hasn't just given it to you, but find it for yourself and go and own it. And that ultimately comes down to solving problems that you see. The second is creativity. You know, when it comes to solving problems, the answer isn't always obvious. And it's not always easy just to come up with the one thing that's going to fix whatever that problem is. And so you do have to be creative sometimes. And constraints help you be creative. So if you have no budget to spend on solving a problem, you can probably still solve it. Maybe not in the way that you'd really like to, but it's definitely still possible. So even if you think I'm not a creative person, like I can't draw or I don't stand up in front of people, I'm not an actor, that doesn't mean you're not creative. Creativity is just the ability to think about things differently. And so whilst you might not call it creativity, if you come up with an idea that someone else in your group hasn't thought of, you've been creative, and that other person might have come up with a different idea to what you did. They've also been creative in order to think of what that solution might be. Thirdly, probably the most important in all of this is teamwork. Never underestimate the power of a group of people coming together. And there's a quote at the end that I'll share around this as well. And I've really seen this through the pandemic. The team that I work in at Google has really come together, but actually more widely, we're a company with over 100,000 employees, and it's been amazing to see how such a big business, one of the richest companies in the world as well, has actually come together to do good in times of adversity for the globe. And I think it's really critical that teams can come together across their own kind of borders, if you like, to help each other. And finally, leadership. Now, even if you're thinking, I don't want to ever manage people, I don't want to be in a role where I have to look after people, that's fine. Management is not for everyone, but leadership should be for everybody. You should take leadership of what you're doing. Leadership doesn't mean necessarily leading other people, but you should just lead by example. Do the best you can at what you're doing so that other people see how you're doing it and they follow along. Speak up when you see an injustice. More importantly, and highlighted now more than ever, say something when you feel like you should, and be that leader that you would like to see from other people, like model the behavior you would like to see from other people. As a teenager then, and these prompts were given to me, I think the biggest thing I wish I knew as a teenager was YouTube was going to be huge, because I think I would have just been a YouTuber and tried to make a career out of that. It feels like that's difficult now. It's a really saturated thing, but there are videos that I made as a kid that we put on YouTube when I was a teenager. And maybe if I had just run at that, I would be in a completely different place now. But actually, that boils down to a bigger thing. I've just tried a lot of stuff. I would call myself a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I've done things like discos. I used to do mobile discos with my mates. We did people's 18th birthdays. We've done a couple of weddings, and lots of other random odd jobs like that. I applied for a competition when I was 19 or 20, I think, with Cadbury, where I had to travel around the country filming videos. I won £20,000, which blows my mind. Spent it all straight away. Again, wasn't very sensible with that. But those opportunities only came about because I put myself out there, and I almost didn't realize I was doing it. If I had been more conscious about it, maybe I could have actually spotted even more of those things as well. So the point of calling out YouTube here is just don't be afraid to put yourself out there and do what looks good to you and what feels good. And then in terms of the careers, then I feel like I don't really see that I've had a career as such. I see that I have done a lot of different things that have pieced together. And looking back, I can tell a nice story where they all kind of fit together nicely. But the reality is that isn't how it actually worked. I didn't plan a nice path for me to do it. If you can do that, by the way, great. But if you're feeling a bit lost, don't worry. You will get there and you'll figure it out as you go. And even now, I couldn't tell you what I think I'll be doing in 5 or 10 years, because who knows, like I might discover a new passion that I didn't have before. So if you want to work at Google, check out the Google Careers website. There's a whole student section. Google does a ton of internships every year. So once you've been to university or you're at university, definitely look at internships. They run across the business. And I know they recently did a work experience thing as well. So keep an eye out for that next year too. If you want to get into education, I think Twitter is a really good place to start. There's a whole community of teachers and teacher trainees on Twitter sharing amazing ideas. If you follow #EDU Twitter, there's a really good place to have a look at what's happening there. And if you want to get into training or public speaking, kind of like what I said earlier, start making videos, get used to the sound of your own voice, start training with small groups or just one-to-one. And the most important thing is listen to feedback. Now, you need to understand the difference between feedback that people are giving you constructively that's going to help you and people that are just being idiots. And so, but do listen to the feedback that comes to you. It might feel personal, but it isn't. When someone is giving you feedback, generally they're doing it because they want you to be better. They want you to help improve your skills. And I think that's particularly important when it comes to training and speaking like this. One thing I did, by the way, as well, which really helped, is I hosted a community radio show for about a year on a Friday afternoon. And I found that really helped as well. It got me used to hearing the sound of my own voice with headphones on and that kind of thing too. If we can skip 2 slides on, Ben, to the last one, and then we'll wrap up. So just 2 kind of quick things that underpin everything that I think about that have kind of stuck with me through my life. I think I heard this first one probably back in primary school, which is treat other people as you would like to be treated. For me, there are 2 things that I really want to be. One is kind. I think it's good to be a kind person. And the 2 is I want to be thought of as having integrity, which means that I follow through with what I say I'm going to do. That can be really hard. You don't always want to overpromise, for example. But essentially, I should treat people kindly because that's the way I would like to be treated. I would like people to come to me and treat me with respect that I've earned. And be kind and consider that I'm trying to do the right thing. The second is a quote from a video that I saw when we were doing a lot of Google work that says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And for me, I think that just shows the power of, if there's something you really believe in, something that you want to make a difference in, a thing about the world that you want to change, you can make that change. It won't happen if you don't put yourself out there, get a group of people together and do it. So I hope that's been interesting to hear about my journey so far. I think there's maybe a few more questions. We'll jump in there.
Oh, you've got a lot of questions, definitely, yeah. So
about your stuff, Dean.
I'll probably try and pick up a couple of key questions. You may also want to sort of jump in the comments and try and pick up some of them as well. I mean, this question you maybe don't want to go into in too much detail, but
it's a good question. So actually, this is interesting, right? So through the pandemic, we saw that some students decided that they were going to, we call it review bomb the Play Store, because if an app gets enough one-star reviews, it will be automatically removed, and people figured that out. And so obviously if the app gets automatically removed, then that's a really good excuse for not having the app to be able to do your work on your phone. So there's a cross-functional effort between the team that managed the Play Store and the classroom team to make sure that the app wasn't taken down when this happened. In general, though, when feedback is genuine and you can submit feedback through the classroom app, one thing that I love about the teams here, and when I speak to the engineering teams, is they read all of that feedback. They do genuinely look at every piece of feedback that gets sent in to understand what people really need and want to be able to make the most out of our products. And I think that's really important. One of the values at Google is respect the customer. Like we should listen to our end users, regardless of if the product is free or not. It doesn't matter. We should understand, listen to, and build products that are going to be helpful for people.
Brilliant. Just one more question, Dean, which I think is a really good one, is how do you maintain a good relationship with colleagues while keeping a good workload, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think relationships right now are really important. But I also think they're really difficult to have when you're just talking to everyone like this through a screen. So what we've tried to do in our team in particular is build in some social time. So I found myself doing some gaming, for example, with a few people from the team, playing some PUBG. If there's any gamers out there, I'm not very good at it, but that's what we've been doing. We have a thing coming up with some of the UK team where we're going to make a succulent garden. We're going to do like a workshop making a garden of succulents. And just having some time at the beginning of meetings, even just 5 minutes to discuss like, hey, what's on your mind today? How are you feeling? How was your weekend? That stuff feels like it might be wasting time in a business meeting, but I find it's really important to make everyone feel like they are valued and they are part of the team. And in terms of keeping a good work-life balance, that's another thing that right now is really difficult. You know, before I would get up and I would go into the office and I would leave the office and go home. So even if I did stay at the office longer, I was still separated from like, here's where I work and here's where I play, if you like, here's where I get to relax. And so with the current situation, I think it's just about drawing a line. Sometimes I'm going to have to work a bit later for whatever reason. You know, through the pandemic, we saw tens of thousands of schools overnight sign up for G Suite and want to use it. What should happen, place where this can and does happen.
Lost, Dean.
You just went a bit jittery, Dean, just at the key point I think you were making. And we'll give you a couple of moments just to sort of level it out and get back on. We'll see how Dean's connection goes. Can I just give a big thanks to Jack for continuing to make the comments active. And Jack's actually shared a quote as well. All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Cool. I know Dean will probably try and jump in the comments and pick up any that we've missed. Really appreciate that's gone down well. But we also have a number of other speakers that we want to share with you today across different industries and backgrounds and that kind of thing. So, yeah, Lawrence, who do we have next?
We have Theresa, and I'm looking very forward to hearing her speak. Know her through mutual friends. and they said that, you know, you're going to be inspired by Theresa. So no pressure, Theresa, at all. But I'm looking forward to hearing you speak, and I'm sure so will the crowd. I'm picking up a few comments. Dean will be back. We will be having a Q&A. So don't worry, he'll be back. But I'm going to hand over to Theresa now to present.
Thank you. Perfect, thank you. So hi guys, my name is Theresa Semako and I'm an enterprise customer success manager at a data startup called Chattermill. So if any of you aren't familiar with the term or the company I work for, I'll give you a little bit of background. So you typically find customer success managers at software or technology companies where external businesses have signed pretty lengthy contracts, typically a year or more, for a sizable amount, and it's the responsibility of us customer success managers to make sure they're happy and they're using the technology to meet their business objectives. And for anyone that isn't familiar with Chattermill, which I'm sure you've never heard of, we are a company that have been around for 3 to 4 years and technically is what we typically call a startup because they're new, they're not established, and they're quite small. And essentially what the company does is wherever people leave reviews about a company's business in terms of their customer service, our technology uses machine learning and AI to make sense of that data and then deliver that data back to a company. So for example, if they weren't using our technology, there would be someone internally that would be going through thousands and thousands of comments and manually making sense of that data. So that's why they use our technology, and that's why we are hired to make sure they're making the use of the technology they've purchased. So typically, what does my role involve? So on a really basic level, it's our responsibility of customer success managers to make sure clients are getting the most out of the technology they've invested in. That is our core focus. We need to make sure they're happy. We need to make sure they're using this technology and they love it. But outside of that, we need to make sure we are experts of the technology that we use because it's us that customers come to ask questions, make sure they're getting it, provide expertise. And typically how that works is, so before you even get your portfolio of customers, so what will happen is a salesperson will sign on a new client and then we will get given that client. So at any one time, you can be working with 12, 25, 40 clients. So at my current organization, I have a portfolio of 15 clients. They are mine. I manage them. Nobody else is responsible for them. And it's my responsibility to make sure my 15 clients are getting the best use out of the technology that they're using. So therefore, it's absolutely fundamental that you know how to build relationships, because I have to build relationships with all of my clients. But I also need to build relationships internally, because I will need to go to maybe the support team to say, one of my customers is having issues with the technology. Can you help me? I sometimes need to go to the engineering team and be like, one of my customers has requested, can we build this new feature within the platform? So you need to be really, really good at building relationships with all types of people across all types of businesses. And then once I know my customers are happy, it's also my responsibility to make sure that I can essentially get more money out of that account. It's not in a way that you go in and say, give me more money. It needs to be very strategic. It needs to be very on an advisable basis. And therefore, I am targeted on making sure that out of all of my accounts, I'm extracting more revenue out of them. And then when the contracts are coming up to be renewed, sometimes it's every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. It depends. It's my responsibility to make sure that they renew with our service year on year. And that is one of the ways I'm targeted, because if my customers are happy, they're getting the most out of the technology, it's going to be super easy for them to renew. So what studying or training did I have? So I didn't have any particular training for this role. I wouldn't say you need to do a particular course or anything like that to do this role. However, I was always interested in IT and business. So naturally, I now work in technology and I work in a business role. I did IT for my GCSEs. At A levels, I did business and IT. And then on a degree level, I also studied marketing, but I actually never worked in marketing after I left uni. So that's that. And then what I did for this role is I also got a professional certificate in customer success. You absolutely do not need to do that, but I thought it would be super useful to kind of just get certified in my field. So where have I worked previously? So prior to working at this company, I actually started working at this company in March, so I haven't been there that long. I worked at another startup called Conversocial, which was a social customer service platform. And before coming back in March, I actually was a customer success manager for that company in North America. And I worked there for 2.5 years. And then prior to that, I actually worked as a business development representative. And in layman terms, when you work at startups, people don't typically know them. Some of them have been around for 6 months by the time you go in, a year, 2 years, 3 years, it depends. And typically people don't come to them. You need to go out and you essentially need to hunt for business and sales and leads. And then you pass those leads on to the sales team. And that's what I was doing prior to becoming a customer success manager.
Hey, Theresa, before we go on to your sort of proudest professional achievement, there's a few questions that come in. If I can put a few to you now, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
So Shannon asked, has there ever been a time when you can't help a customer, which I thought was an astute question. In your role, obviously, your aim is that there will never be such a situation.
Absolutely, all the time. There will be times where you absolutely can't help the customer, and before you decide you can't help the customer, you need to go back internally and see if and where you can get help. So to give you an example, sometimes there'll be a piece of our technology that cannot do what the customer wants to do. And what I'll do is I'll go back to the engineering team and be like, our customer is asking for this piece of technology. Can we build it? So that will always be my first point of call. Depending on how much the customer is paying, I'll be completely honest, they will build it. If a customer is paying £1 million, they will absolutely build it. If it's a small client, sometimes they won't. Are you going to go back and say you don't spend enough, so we're not going to build it? No, you have to be really tactful. And sometimes you have to be honest and just say, unfortunately, right now, we're not going to build it, but we're going to add it to our roadmap and see what happens. So you need to be very good at being able to tell people that you can't necessarily give them what they want.
I mean, it probably links into a few other questions as well then. So Darian was sort of asking you about, does dealing with a large number of customers, can that be stressful? How do you handle this? Have you got a support team around you, that kind of thing?
It can. I think this job works for people that can deal with handling with lots of different human beings. You deal with human beings as much as you are dealing with technology. My role is a very social role. And yeah, there are days where you're stressed, to put it politely, but you have to find ways to handle that, deal with that. And yes, I do. We have a director of customer success. He looks after all us customer success managers, and that will always be my first point of call. If I'm having a particular difficult client, I'll be completely honest, not all your clients are nice. Not all of them are easy to work with. So you will always I sometimes bring my CEO on calls and be like, I've got a particular difficult client and I need your help because this client isn't going to renew if we do XYZ. So that's the beauty of working in a small company. You can pull in different members of different teams to help you.
I know. So back when I was a teacher, I'm sure numerous times I've had the conversation with a student like, you're not going to like everybody when they've had a disagreement with another student, or, you know, they're finding it tough with a particular teacher. And I always used to use the example, cliched as it is, like when you go into work, you're not going to like everyone. So it's potentially a good skill to pick up. But if you're okay for another couple of questions before I let you crack on, David sort of asks what keeps you motivated. And then Chloe asked something along the same lines of sort of, do you like your job? And actually, I think when we get to the next bit about your proudest achievement, that might help too. But yeah, what keeps you motivated, and kind of, are there some points when you don't want to do it?
I think, especially when you work at a startup and, you know, they're new, there's a guy there or a woman that's created a company that, you know, typically they founded in their bedroom. And there is something really inspiring about working for somebody live out their dreams. So that definitely helps. But I'm also super, super interested in technology. I like the way it can change people's lives. And as much as you do have some difficult days, there is nothing like helping an external company meet their business objectives using your technology and knowing you helped them. So if you like helping people, every day you get to help someone. So that definitely keeps me motivated to know that I'm making a difference in my customers' lives.
Awesome, thank you. I'll let you sort of jump back into the bit that was planned, but there's definitely a few more questions as well. So Ben, Matthew, we can jump onto your questions towards the end in the wider Q&A too. But yeah, I will let you get back to this. Your proudest professional achievement today.
So my proudest professional achievement today is prior to working at this company, I actually was able to move with my previous organization to America, New York City to be precise, to be a customer success manager out there working with American clients. That was really good. I worked with, if anyone's been to New York, I worked with the New York trains. I worked with sometimes furniture companies, sometimes beauty companies. There was a really wide range of clients and they were all American, and it was really good to travel around America visiting them. Definitely every day wasn't, you know, a walk in the park, but I was definitely proud to get the opportunity to do that for 2.5 years. So what skills or knowledge are essential for this role industry? So for this particular role, I would say the key thing you need to be able to do is to be able to communicate in all forms. You are going to be chairing business meetings with lots of different people in the meeting. So you need to be able to communicate non-verbally. You can't necessarily sit in a meeting and cross your hands just because it doesn't look professional. So you need to be really conscious of how you're communicating non-verbally. You also need to know how to communicate verbally. You are going to be speaking to lots of different people, and some of these people just will not understand your technology. Some of the concepts are going to be really complex and complicated, and it's for you to break that down into really easable, digestible content. Sometimes you need to write it up, sometimes you need to speak it. So you need to be really good at communicating, and you super need to be good at project and time management. As I said, I currently work with 12 different accounts, and let's say I have a day where all 12 accounts want a piece of me. I cannot let them know who spends the most money or who is the most important. It's my responsibility to decide, how am I going to communicate with all these people? How am I going to communicate internally? Sometimes you will have travel. Obviously, we're not traveling in COVID, but some days you're going to be out of the office for 3 days. So how are you going to make sure on the 2 days you are in the office that you get to do all the work that you didn't get to do in those 3 days? And last but not least, you need to be really good at listening. And the reason I say active listening is because sometimes it's very easy to listen to people, but not actually taking anything they've said. So you need to be really good at listening to people, taking in what they've said. And one way to see if you're really good at active listening is when someone is talking to you, to sometimes put back some of the things they've said to you to show that I am listening and I understand what you're saying. And as a teenager, I wish I knew startups were a thing. I always knew I wanted to work in business or technology, but I always thought it was going to be for a big corporate company. And startups they're typically small, they are new, they're not for everybody. And I will say that some people absolutely love them and some people don't. Some people love them because they're small, they're agile, you get to work with a really new piece of tech. You get to work with really inspiring people, and no day is the same because there aren't any real rules. Everyone is kind of, dare I say it, making it up as they go along to make sure they're successful. Some people like that, some people don't. But for me personally, having worked in corporate and startup, I 100% prefer the startup world, but I didn't even know they were a thing when I was a teenager. And also there are many different career paths within the business field. I thought the coolest job in business was to be a marketing manager. That job is cool, don't get me wrong, but I didn't know there are so many other different roles you can do within the business field. And I'd say as well, don't be afraid to try. I think, you know, when you're a kid, everyone's like feels like you must know what you want to do and you don't want to get it wrong just in case you might disappoint somebody. And you can't disappoint anyone, because at the end of the day, if you try, it's in the trying that you find out, do you know what, I don't actually like this and this isn't for me, and you saved yourself a lot of time going any further. Or you may try and be like, I absolutely love this and I'm so glad I did this and this is what I want to be in. So absolutely don't be afraid to try. And how can you find out more information? So if you do want to work in startups and you just want to know what different types of startups exist, I would absolutely go to the website Work in Startups. They have lots of different startups looking for entry-level jobs. They kind of talk about the startup industry, and that's a really, really good resource. And as well, if you do want to work in a startup, every single startup is different, and there are startups in every type of field. And a good way to see if this is the type of kind of industry you want to work in is see if you can get an entry-level role. We always need help, and there's always going to be entry-level roles. Some of them are going to be paid, some of them are not, but it's a really good way to kind of find out if you like this scrappy, small kind of environment, or you prefer the kind of big corporate organizations. And if you want to ask me any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram as well. My LinkedIn is under the same name, Theresa Semaphore. I will always be happy to answer any questions you have about customer success, startups, business in general. I will always be willing to help. So yeah, just reach out to me. I'm always a message away. And anything else I would like to add. So if you do want to be a customer success manager, this role is super, super fun for people that are curious, because you're going to be working with people, you're going to be working with technology, so you have to ask lots of questions. You have to like people. If you don't like people, you absolutely cannot do this job, to be honest, because you literally spend your every single day working with a wide variety of people and solving problems. There are going to be problems and you need to be able to solve them and just find a solution, and essentially find a solution quickly and work well under pressure. And the reason I say that is you are going to be working with a wide range of customers, clients, and all of them are going to have various needs, and you need to be able to work with all those various needs while being cool, calm, and collected. And you also need to wear many hats. Some days you're going to be a problem solver. Some days you're going to be on the road traveling to clients and spending 2 or 3 days with them. Some days you're going to be sitting down with the engineering team, thinking about new ways to kind of develop the tool to be more in line with what your customers want. Some days you're going to be doing contracts and figuring out ways to get them to renew. And you wear many, many different hats. So if you like variety, then this role is really good for you. And yeah, like I said as well, don't always get caught up in a role. Figure out what you like to do as an individual. Do you like people? Do you like, do you like a job with lots of travel? Do you like a job that is really analytical? Kind of find out what you like to do as an individual and then find roles from there. Don't necessarily get caught up in, I want to do this role, because there's so many other parts of your personality that you can apply to different roles.
Thank you. That was a really good presentation. I learned a lot from that as well, Theresa, for my own business as well in terms of startups, and so thanks a lot for that. We have tons of questions for you, but what we're going to do is we're going to put you backstage, and then we're going to bring those questions to you in the general Q&A. Honestly, it's blowing up on the comments about the information that you've just put out there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, certainly a bunch of active listeners watching in today. So there are loads of questions coming in. It's awesome.
Let's go.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Theresa. We'll see you back in a moment. Okay, lads. Keep the questions coming, everyone. We know we haven't answered all of them, but we want to sort of come back at the end and pick up some of your really key questions. So I would have mentioned Matthew and Ben, but then John, Shannon, Darren. I know you've asked a load of questions, and Gloria as well. So we'll come back to those soon enough. But we have another amazing guest to introduce. So Lawrence, I'll pass over you to do that.
Yes, we've got Crystal, who is a legal and business affairs manager and A&R for Columbia Records, and looking very forward to this talk. There's actually been comments already about looking forward to you asking questions. So I know the crowd are really excited about this. And thank you for joining us, because I know you are busy today. But yeah, looking forward to it. So how are you today?
I'm okay, sorry. I think I've lost my voice. I don't know why.
No
So
problem.
let me know if you can't hear me, but
We can hear
does
you
that
really
work?
well. Yeah, that's perfect. We can hear you really
sorry,
well.
'cause I've lost
So
my voice, but yeah.
see, thank you. This is real dedication, people, losing their voice and she's still coming to present. So now we're really happy that you could join us. And did you get the contract out?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, right. Sorry, I'll put you right on the thing there. So I'm going to let you do the presentation. I'm going to hand over to you. Just indicate to Ben when you want to move on to the next slide.
Okay.
Thank
How
you.
do I indicate? How do you say, Ben?
Yeah, yes, Ben. Yeah, that's perfect. Just Ben. He's used to that. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Just give it a pause. I'll try and do it, but okay, if I'm a bit too slow, just give me a direct instructions. All good too.
That's fine. That's
Thank
cool.
you.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Crystal Kiwi. I am a solicitor by training and trade, and now I am a legal and business affairs manager, an A&R at Columbia Records in the UK. So Columbia Records is a division of Sony Music Entertainment. So we're one of, I think, 7 labels. Columbia is one of 6 or 7 labels that sit under Sony Music in the UK. So what does my role involve? Well, just to start off, no 2 days are the same. I will say that from the beginning. But mainly my role as a business affairs manager is very different from my role as an A&R. But I've just mixed both on the slide here, just to give you guys a flavor of what I do. So the main thing that I do, so Lawrence mentioned earlier about did I get the contract up? So my main role revolves around drafting and negotiating recording agreements with artists. So whenever we want to sign new artists, I'm responsible for drafting and negotiating those contracts. Once we do have the artist signed, my role then slightly changes. So now I'm responsible for clearing features on upcoming singles and albums. So if we have any artists that are providing feature verses on any tracks, I would normally negotiate the terms that apply to those features. So negotiating how much we pay for the feature, what royalties, negotiating if we need a video, anything to do with that talent and that feature is what I'd normally do. And then I normally would also work with our brands team. So we have a separate brands team that sit within Sony. They don't sit within Columbia Records, but they sit within our central Sony team, and they negotiate brand deals for all of our artists in the building. So normally I would work with the team to negotiate the brand deals for our artists. So, I've done stuff with Instagram now recently with a lot of artists that are doing live sessions with brands on Instagram. So I did one with Pull and Bear for one of our artists. We've done stuff with Tommy Hilfiger, Beats by Dre, just a lot of brands. Our team would work with the brands team to negotiate the terms of that deal for the artists and to make sure that we get the best deal for our artists. And so, as I said, my role as a lawyer is very different from my role as an A&R, because as an A&R, I'm very involved, or heavily involved in scouting new artists. So that means getting new music in, getting demos in, actually just trying to get some new artists, like sessions with existing artists that we have, or sessions with producers that we have contacts with. So a lot of that is kind of just listening to music, really. I have 2 meetings a week where we sit as a team and we listen to music, we scout, we listen to what demos we have in. You pitch to artists that you're thinking of signing, and then us as an A&R team discuss all the new signings and see which ones we're going to go forward with and which ones we still just want to try work and develop. So that's my role at Sony. Ben, thank you. What studying or training have I had for my role? So if I start from the beginning, and this is start going back maybe a decade ago, I studied law at King's College London, and I got a qualifying legal degree, because there are two different legal degrees. You can get a BA in law, so a bachelor's in law, or you can get an LLB honors, which is what we call a qualifying law degree. And I studied that for 3 years. I studied the core modules that you need to study in order to get a qualifying law degree, which is criminal law, property law, contract law, law of trust, jurisprudence. And then I picked other very commercial electives because I knew I wanted to be a commercial lawyer. So I studied company law, I studied competition, I studied IP law as well, and commercial contracts. So the last 4 weren't mandatory, but the first 6 were. So they were all spread out over 3 years. And then I graduated and I moved on to BPP Law School, where I studied for actually 6 months. So I did an accelerated law program. So I did the accelerated LPC because I actually got a training contract from my first employer, who's Slaughter and May, who paid for me to go to law school and gave me a grant while I studied. So one of the stipulations was that I had to study the accelerated LPC, which started in January and I finished in August. So that was a 6-month course as opposed to the normal 1 year course that people normally study. So I did that, and then I moved on to Slaughter and May, where I was a trainee solicitor, which means that I actually worked for the law firm, so I was getting paid as a trainee, but I sat in different departments to be able to work in these departments to then be able to decide which speciality or which department I wanted to qualify into. So as a trainee, I sat in our corporate department, which dealt with mergers and acquisitions. So whenever 2 companies want to buy each other, well, if one company wants to buy another company, or if 2 companies want to merge together, that was done in corporate. I then sat in employment and pensions. So I did a lot of things involving the employment issues that companies may have. So actually mainly worked with pension funds, actually. And then I moved on to tax. So I did 3 months in tax, worked with other companies there, looking at all their tax issues involved either when you're merging or buying a company, or just general tax issues that evolve in a company. And then I moved on to finance, where I actually qualified. So I sat in the finance department for 6 months, where I did providing loans. I did work involved providing loans to companies. And then I did the very sexy work of derivatives, which is very complicated, but it's just involved in trading of contracts and trading of commodities. So I worked with Unilever, I worked with BA on doing a lot of their derivative trading and documenting of the derivatives. So it's quite complicated, so I wouldn't want to go into that in detail. And then I moved on to IP, actually, which was actually where I wanted to qualify as an IP lawyer, but I hated working in the IP department. So I actually qualified into the finance department, but I think it was really good that I studied IP because my job now involves a lot of IP because it involves a lot of copyright, which is what I studied at King's, and then I sat in the IP department for 6 months. So that gave me a good basis for what I do now. So I then qualified as a solicitor at Slaughter and May, and I worked as a corporate lawyer for 4 years, dealing mainly with companies. So I wasn't advising artists like I do now, or advising music companies. I was actually advising banks. So I worked a lot with Santander. I worked a lot with the World Bank in my 3rd role. I worked a lot with Net-a-Porter, World Duty Free. So a lot of companies in the 4 years that I was actually a corporate lawyer. I then worked with an artist called Mr. Easy at the same time as being a corporate lawyer. And I was his global legal counsel for 2 years. So I did that at the same time before moving to Columbia Records, which is now my current role. So yeah, it's been almost a decade actually in legal practice. So I joined legal practice in 2012 as a trainee solicitor. I was a trainee solicitor for 2 years. Then I became an associate. So I qualified as a solicitor, became an associate, and I was an associate for 4.5 years in corporate law, and then moved over to Sony, where I've been a business and legal affairs manager for about 18 months. So yeah, we'll take a look. It's about 8 years in legal practice. Ben, thank you. So I think I've kind of covered this, but this is kind of going more into detail of all the places that I've worked. So as you guys can tell, I'm probably much older than a lot of you guys. But I actually started off at NatWest Bank, actually, in 2008. I worked in NatWest while I was at university. So that was a part-time job. And I worked 10 hours a week while studying. So that shows that it is possible to work and also study full-time at the same time. And it was also just a good way for me to get experience of the working world before actually going into the working world. And just that I had some good pocket money during the summers to travel as a student. And then I worked at Slaughter and May, which is part of the Magic Circle, which is the top 5 law firms in the UK. So there I was a trainee solicitor for 2 years and an associate for 1 year before moving on to White & Case. And I was there for just under 1 year. And then I kind of took the biggest gamble of my career and I moved to Ghana, which is a little known fact about me. I've actually moved to Ghana and worked for a law firm there for 6 months before moving back to London and being an associate at a company called Hunt & Andrews Kurth, where I actually focus more on Africa-related transactions. So it's actually at Hunt & Andrews Kurth that I worked with the World Bank. I worked with Africa Export-Import Bank, what we call a Frexim, on a lot of their trade deals with companies, small companies, banks, oil companies in Africa. I actually worked on one of my transactions there. Actually, I worked on financing a road in Liberia, which is actually quite fun. And then I transitioned over because I started to realize that actually, as much as I enjoyed corporate law at the beginning, I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And that's when I transitioned over to music and Columbia Records, where I work now.
Hey, Crystal, just before we move on to the next slide, a load of questions coming in. So I was going to fire a couple of questions at you, if that's all right. I suppose the first one, if we bring in Shannon's question, was, did you always want to be a lawyer? Because obviously there's a lot of qualifications and time that needs to be put in to get to where you've been. So was that something you always aimed for?
Yeah, I kind of knew I wanted to be a lawyer from like 15. As you can tell, my voice is gone because I've been talking a lot, negotiating a lot, and been on phone calls. And I remember when I was about 15 in my English language class, and we had to present arguments for a debate that we felt strongly about. And this is quite weird because I think I've been a socialist from like 15. But my argument was that I believe that nurses should be paid as much as footballers. So that's what I argued about. And I remember one of my friends saying, "You love to argue, you should be a lawyer." And that kind of planted the seed. So I was like, yeah. So I kind of knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I think as the years went by and I started to understand the difference between a lawyer and a barrister and understanding, the different disciplines within law itself, I think that's when I was able to refine my interest in knowing that actually I like numbers, I like commerce, I like business. So actually I can be a lawyer, but I can be a corporate lawyer that focuses on businesses and focuses on the more commercial parts of law. Because I realized I actually didn't want to be a criminal lawyer. I didn't want to work in family law because I realized I get a bit too emotionally involved. And so corporate law was the best for me because it meant I could still be analytical, but analytical in the business context.
Cool. And that kind of brings us, I suppose, up to where you got to in terms of you're currently working in the music industry. There's been a few questions around when you mentioned about scouting for new artists. So Matthew asked sort of what's the time scale on scouting for new artists?
It depends really. Like it depends on where the artist is in their kind of career. I think there are kind of two ways that we can do it. Sometimes our scouting is very data based. Sorry, my colleague just called me there. Sometimes our scouting can be very data based. So we're just looking at what songs are really being heavily streamed. Like for a good example, is Lil Nas X. is an example of a very data-led A&R process for us. That was a song that our systems just started realizing this is being heavily streamed. We should start having conversations with the artist. So from hearing about him to signing, it was a pretty short process. So he's actually signed to Columbia US, but that was something that Columbia UK picked up. Because he's a US artist, we had to refer it to the US so that they could sign him there. But then we have other artists who, like Coffee, which is signed to the UK, was, there's this new artist who's putting out stuff on YouTube, and you're just constantly trying to follow up with these artists, whatever songs that they have, and just trying to see, can you develop them before you move on to signing? So that could take up to 3 to 6 months, just depending on where the artist is with their life cycle, actually, or within their career, because there are certain artists that have been bubbling in the background for a while, and as an A&R, you're like, you kind of keep them in mind, but you don't think they're ready to be signed yet. And there's some people that the track just starts flying and people are just streaming at ridiculous rates, and then that we need to get on it. So it just depends on the artist, the track. Is this more of an organic A&R process? I.e., are you going to actively be involved in the studio, getting them with producers, or is this an artist that already has music and you just want to sign them and get the music out?
I think I've got to ask on behalf of the kids watching as well then. So you've mentioned a few names there, but Shannon and probably a few others are keen. Like, what's the biggest artist that you've dealt with so far? Any names you can mention?
No, there are a few that we're working on now, because I've been an A&R for about 18 months. And most of my job actually involves the legal side. So it's a bit weird because it's so busy that a lot of my time is now on the legal side of stuff. But no, can I? I won't be able to disclose any right now because they're still in the process of being signed.
I don't want to push you on that, just in case.
Yeah, but I work very closely with Notes. They actually signed Notes before I came in, but I was involved in that because Notes is management. I actually went to school with Notes is management. So I was heavily involved in that. So that's probably a name I can say, Notes. I was involved in that process, although I wasn't the A&R that signed it. So I was involved in that process because one of Notes' managers is my friend. And actually they have a label now, so I work a lot with them across their label with signing other artists. So I'd say maybe Notes is the biggest one right now that I work with, and I was heavily involved in that process.
Awesome. Thank you for, I didn't want to get you into any trouble along the way. Yeah. There's actually one question here that's probably quite relevant in terms of the careers. You mentioned a bit of like making a choice about which form of law you wanted to follow. And Darren's just asked, like, what's the difference between a lawyer and a barrister in court? So I probably a lot you could say about that, but yeah, what's the best way to help everyone understand the different aspects of law?
Well, if I'm strictly going to the question, and this is not me being sticky, but Darren, so what you actually say here, a barista is someone like that serves you coffee at Starbucks. So, so just so you know, so a barrister is spelled BARRISTER. But a big difference is that a barrister actually is the one that goes and presents arguments in court. As a solicitor, I do not have the rights, but I have the right to be heard in an upper court, but I don't have the rights to be heard, for example, in the Supreme Court, or I don't have rights to be heard in what other cases? The High Court, for example. So what we do is, well, if I was a dispute resolution lawyer, or as a lawyer that was involved in conflicts, what we would normally do is we prepare the case. So we go and look through all the evidence. When we're sent the evidence for discovery, we would go through all the arguments and actually formulate the arguments, and then you hand it over to a barrister. So that's how it works. So I've never done dispute resolution. I didn't sit in any dispute resolution departments, and I had no intention to be a dispute resolutions lawyer. But from the experience I know from my other friends that did go into dispute resolution, that's how it normally works. So the lawyers are heavily involved in looking at the evidence, finding, so I had a bit of experience in, so one of the times I did, one of our clients was a bank and they were involved in a dispute. And my job as a lawyer is I literally had to sit there and go through like hundreds of thousands of emails looking for evidence that we would need to defend our case. So we would go through all these emails. We sat literally in a room for about a month. So there was maybe like 12 of us who all sat in a room for a month going through all these emails. And these were like private chats between bankers. And we would have to go through all these emails. And we had criteria of things that we would look for that would help our case or would go against our case. And then once we got all that evidence, we would hand it over to a barrister who would then argue our case in court. Sometimes you're hoping that it doesn't go to court. So sometimes you're hoping that as a lawyer, you've got enough, or a solicitor, you've got enough evidence to go to the other side and say, well, actually, we have this evidence, which means that we should settle now before going to court. So sometimes as solicitors, that's what we would do. Can we settle this before we go to court and have to spend millions on barristers and millions on legal fees? So we work a lot together if it's necessary, but we like to try to get to a point where we settle before we need a barrister, if that helps.
Awesome. Yeah. And Darren mentioned he's been to Costa too much, obviously. Appreciate that. Cool. Thank you for picking a few of those questions. We do have a load more, but I'll let you get back to working through the bits you prepared before. So I think I need to leave you back on your proudest professional achievement. I'll let you get back on track with that.
Yes, I think for me, that's my proudest achievement, because like getting my training contract with Sora in May was emotionally draining. Like applying for training contracts is like so time consuming, because you literally have to, they ask you questions like, why do you want to be a lawyer? Why the firm? Tell us about yourself. Talk about a commercial issue that's interested you. So it actually takes a lot of time. If you're applying for 5 or 10 training contracts during the summer, that is very time consuming to be able to get an application which you are, one, proud of, and two, that you think is going to get you the training contract. And I remember when I went to my tax tutor, when I was still at King's, and I told him that I wanted to apply for training contracts. And I remember he told me that, there were three main barriers that I faced. And 2008, I'm not sure if anyone does remember, but 2008 was at the beginning of like the financial crash. So I remember I started university in 2008 and I was applying for training contracts in 2010. So by this time, the economy hadn't recovered. We were still just coming out. So there was loads of things going on where law firms were either cutting the numbers of people that they were taking for training contracts or deferring people. I remember my tax tutor telling me that one of the big obstacles was that, we're still in the recession and people aren't really hiring. And then he said time wasn't on my side. I had to do all these applications. And I remember he just paused for a while and I knew exactly what he was going to say, but he paused and he looked at me and he was like, you're a Black female. And that was one of the barriers. And that really disheartened me for someone to tell me that this thing that I couldn't control, being a Black female, was one of the reasons why he thought it would be difficult for me to get a training contract. And so for me to get a training contract at one of the best law firms, as I said earlier, Sora May is the magic circle. So it's the top 5 law firms. It's highly competitive. They only pick 80 people a year. So imagine out of all the thousands of people who have decided to study law and apply for a law firm, I was one of 80. So that was my biggest and my proudest professional achievement to date, because I think that was the beginning of my kind of career trajectory. Because once you kind of train at the magic circle, this kind of doors, like amazing doors will open, which meant that I could go and work for White & Case, which is like an American law firm after I left. It meant that I could go work in Ghana. It meant that I could come back and get another job when I came back from Ghana. So yeah, that would be my proudest moment. But I've got loads. As I said, I've been in private I've been in legal practice for almost a decade now, so there's loads, but I would say that's my proudest moment. I remember screaming when they called me, actually. I missed the call because I actually had bad reception. And I remember like frantically calling them back, and I said, someone from the law firm's called me, and I don't know who. And then the partner called me back, and I remember screaming down the phone when he told me that I got a training contract. So yeah, that's one of my proudest.
I might need to sort of skip over some of your upcoming slides, but if I may go back to the bit where an obstacle was identified to you that you maybe thought, oh, well, wait a minute, that didn't seem. So when it was mentioned that being a Black female might be an obstacle, is that something that you had ever seen as an obstacle? Or was that someone telling you it might be one that you hadn't really ever thought about?
Yeah, it wasn't, if I'm going to be honest with you, up to that point, and maybe up to university, it wasn't something that I necessarily thought about. Like, my dad is a maths professor. And so I kind of knew I was smart from very early. You know, I knew I was smart. I remember winning a reading challenge when I was about 5 or 6. And I remember like going, like, we have like, this will also show how old I am, but my family still have like our photo albums where we, you know, back in the day, we did have physical photos. So I remember one of those books, and I remember like one of the pictures being a picture of me and my dad. And I remember like I was smiling with like this book that I won because I was like, you know, smart and I won this challenge. And I remember doing my SATs when I was in year 5. Is it year 5? No. Is it year 5? Sorry, I feel really old now. What's the year? Yeah, year 5. Is that where you do your SATs or year 6?
It's year 6 SATs.
Year 6.
Year 6. So I remember I skipped year 2 in primary school because they had run out of things to teach me. So I said my dad was a maths professor and my dad would always teach me when I got home. But my primary school ran out of things to teach me. So I skipped year 2 and went straight to year 3. But then they ran out of things to teach me again. So I had to wait for all my classmates that were now in year 2 to come to year 3. So I actually had to do year 3 twice because my primary school didn't know anything to teach me. And then in year 5, they really told my parents that I was gifted and that I had to actually sit my SATs in a separate room with other people because I sat levels 5 to 7. So I didn't do levels 1 to 5. I sat levels 5 to 7 in maths and science. So I just remember being young and knowing I was clever. I knew I was gifted. I knew I was smart. That never really was a challenge for me. And it wasn't anything that I saw because I was a Black female. I just knew I was smart, right? I just knew numbers was easy for me. I knew I knew a lot of things from early on were quite easy for me. So as I said, my dad's a maths professor. So when I was 13, my cousin was doing his GCSEs. So my dad already taught me GCSE maths. So I already knew I was advanced. So things like race and me being a Black female was an obstacle. I just knew that if I was smart and I worked hard, I'd be rewarded because that's what my life had always taught me, right? I was smart in year 1. I won the reading challenge and I got books. I was smart in secondary school and I got rewarded. I think I did French. I'm Congolese, actually. I'm originally Congolese. And I did French and I did Mandarin in my secondary school. And my school told me to drop Mandarin and do French because they knew I'd get a good grade and they would get funding. So my GCSE grade, I actually got top 5 in the UK. So I got 99.98% in my French GCSE. So and my school got funding. So I just knew that if you were smart, you'd be rewarded. That's just how my life had always been. And then I went to sixth form. And that's where actually I started to find that people started to put race and me being Black and my economic background as a factor, which really threw me off because up to that point, I'd always gone to school with Black people who I also saw as smart. But I remember getting a B in my business studies GCSE. And then when I went to my sixth form, I told them I wanted to study business studies as an A level, and they told me no. Like they said, no, we don't think you should study it because the way they correlate it is if you get like an A or a B on A star in business studies at GCSE, they normally expect you to drop a grade at A level. And so they said, if you got a B at GCSE, we would expect you to get a C at A level. And they didn't want it to drop down their grade. So they were like, we're not going to allow you to enroll for business studies. So I was like, no, that's ridiculous. And I went back and I thought, and I said, I'm going to study business studies. And luckily I did, because that's what actually made me realize I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. Because it was in my business studies class that I learned about mergers and acquisitions. And I told my business studies teacher that, oh, I really like this module, but I want to be a lawyer and I don't think that works. And she said, no, there are lawyers that do mergers and acquisitions. Go and do that. Go and study that. And if I had listened to my sixth form in enrollment, I wouldn't have been that. But they were looking at my economic background and what I got at GCSE, and we don't think you're this smart. And actually, my business studies AS, I got in my first exam, I got 98. I got 89 out of 90. I got 118 out of 120 in my other one, and I got the highest grade in my AS and the second highest grade in my A level, because I just knew if I'm smart and I worked hard, I will be rewarded. So for me, that's when I started to realize people were starting to categorize me as a Black female or someone coming from like a lower economic background and saying, oh, well, this won't help. So I remember my sixth form also forcing me to apply for Oxford, and then assuming that they should put me through the Oxford Access program. So there's a program if you're applying for Oxford, if you're from a low economic background, and if you're the first person from your family to go to university, that they put you through this. But that actually was a disadvantage for me because my dad went to Oxford. My dad has a PhD from Oxford. So then I was like, so you just assume that because I was from East London and I came from a poorer economic background, that you just put me into these things. But I don't even count for that because my dad went to Oxford. So that's when I first started to see it. But up to that point, I never saw it. And so it's now annoying and frustrating when I also see other younger women that I try to mentor, where it's like that barrier has already been placed in front of them, that you're a Black female. So that means this is your barrier, this is your ceiling. Whereas I'm just like, well, no, my whole life has taught me that if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. No matter what race, what gender you are, where you're from, your economic background. And my parents came to this country and they knew no English. And I moved here when I was 2 with my mom. My mom knew no English. My dad knew no English. So I was virtually learning English and maths with my mom, because she was having to relearn this stuff. So that's my background. I've just worked hard. My parents have worked hard. And that's what I'd always tell people, work hard because you will be rewarded.
I think that's a really important lesson there, isn't it, as well? And just that, also what you're saying about you felt you wanted to do business studies and you did push at that because you that's what you felt was right and an opportunity came from that. And I think there's probably an important message there for the kids watching around, like, follow your gut a little bit and sort of believe in yourself in that way. I mean, Lawrence and I do have backgrounds in teaching, but hopefully we represent those teachers that didn't think they were the oracle of all knowledge and information as well.
Yeah. And I think the key thing is, yes, follow your gut, but you have to be prepared to work hard. And I think that's something that's been translated in everything you said there. So yes, go after your dreams, but you've got to be willing to work when you wake up. That's what I want to say to my students. Crystal, it's been an absolutely fantastic talk. I know I wish I could speak to you forever. You probably don't want to speak to me forever, but just so much insightful information that you've given to us. And what is one piece of advice or quote that you would give to our students potentially?
Always, well, what I'm actually trying to live by as well is life is not as short as people make it seem. So there's always space and time for reinvention. I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. That was my dream for 6 years. And I did. I became a corporate lawyer and I loved it when I was there. But the minute that I realized this is a stagnant dream and it doesn't work for me anymore, I reinvented myself and now I'm a music lawyer. So, I went and did the work. I read books. I signed up for seminars. So although you may have a dream at 16 or 17, understand you may be working for the next 40 years of your life. In that space, you have the time, the space, and the kind of grace to have as many careers as you can fit into that. That's why I'd say just keep reinventing yourself.
And probably embrace change as well. I think,
Yes.
I think a lot of people don't like to embrace change. And someone said to me the other day is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable as well. And
Yes.
I really did like that. So Crystal, thank you so much for your talk. I found it very inspiring. And we'll share your socials in the description as well. But thank you. Ben, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, just a massive thank you. Really appreciate your time, and I hope everyone got a lot from it as well. And we have already shared your Instagram handle, which you shared with us earlier, and I've also posted in the chat and the comments a few of your bits of advice about like getting started in the industry as well. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Okay, so I think it's Shannon particularly has been waiting for this one for the whole day. So we have joining us is Jack. So let's bring Jack in. And Lawrence, do you just want to introduce Jack briefly?
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Hi, not too bad, thank you.
Good. I'm waiting patiently there in the background. Right, yeah. So Jack is a veterinary nurse. And he's going to be speaking about his job role. There's been a few students who have been really interested in your talk and looking forward to your lecture as well, should I say. So I'm not going to talk too much, and I'm just going to let you get on with it. And Shannon's already put her comment there as well. So
everyone
no
lives up to the
pressure.
expectation.
Yeah, no pressure at all. So over to you.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, I'm Jack Pye and I'm an RVN, which is a registered veterinary nurse. So we're sort of governed by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, who take sort of over in terms of managing us, making sure everything's done to the highest standard possible, and yeah, just sort of keeping us on the right path. So yeah, the next slide, please. Thank you. So my role as a veterinary nurse is varied. So not one day is the same at all. So I never know what's going to come through the door. The variety of different animals we see, as you can see in the photo, the baby deer that we had in recently, and the other photos is me performing an ultrasound scan. So it's literally anything that can come in. So caring of the patients that we have in, it can be quite intensive and quite labouring, but it's very rewarding in terms of if they come in a very bad way, to see them walk out the door when you've done your job at the end. So that list on there is not extensive. It goes on and on and on. I could sit here all day telling you sort of what we do on a day-to-day basis at work, but that would bore you to tears probably. But yeah, there's a few of the things. I particularly enjoy doing practical work. So we insert IV cannulas for access to the veins, taking blood samples, small procedures. We could do minor operations now as well. And we can do sort of triage of the patients, and obviously assisting the veterinary surgeon. We have to work under the veterinary surgeon and do sort of, they have to make the decisions of what goes on as a clinical and diagnosis, which we can't do as a veterinary nurse, but they both work in harmony with each other, and one job can do the other sort of without the other one. So yeah. Next slide, please. So my path to becoming a veterinary nurse wasn't as straightforward as what it could have been for some people. So a lot of people go to school, they do their GCSEs, they then have to find a training placement. So a practice that will support you throughout your training can be quite difficult to find. That's probably the hardest part of actually becoming a veterinary nurse, I would say. So I, instead of going straight to do my veterinary nurse training from school, I decided to do my level 2 animal nursing assistant, mainly to gain a bit more knowledge, but also because I didn't have the placement lined up already. So I done my level 2 animal nursing assistant and got some work experience over the course of a year from a local veterinary practice, which was absolutely invaluable to see what goes on in a veterinary practice. It's not all cuddling puppies and kittens, I'm afraid. there is that involved, which is very sort of uplifting sometimes. But yeah, it can be a tough job. So to know actually what goes on in a veterinary practice is quite important, and before just delving into it. So and then once I achieved that, I then went on to do my level 3 diploma in veterinary nursing, which is like an apprenticeship based course. So I done 1 day a week at college, performing my assessments and internal exams. And then I went on to do my practical exams as well. The other 4 days I spent working in a veterinary practice, which was a paid position, which is very handy as a student as well. And then I really enjoyed actually having that way round of doing 1 day a week at college and 4 days in practice, because it really develops your practical skills, I feel. So yeah, that was very beneficial in terms of going into a job role straight after qualifying and learning on the job as well. I found really beneficial. So yeah. So my previous jobs are probably a bit random. I worked as a chef for quite a period of time, which is what I'd done for my work experience placement. And then they offered me a job afterwards, which was quite nice to know that they obviously thought I was good enough for a job. And yeah, then I became a student veterinary nurse, got a placement at a local practice, which took 3 years of training. So that was what I knew I wanted to do all along. It was just finding the right placement for me that was close to home, and getting enrolled onto that course. So that was quite interesting. I now work as an emergency and critical care out of hours nurse. So I only actually work night shifts, so excuse if I look a bit sleepy. So I really enjoy the setting of emergency and critical care, not knowing what's going to walk through the door or phone up, instead of the sort of routine stuff that we see on a daily basis. It can be quite emotionally draining sometimes. I think someone put something in the comments about it being emotionally draining. So yeah, it can be quite difficult, but taking time for yourself is quite important. So I do a lot of stuff outside of my job to keep me occupied, and take my mind off work as well. So that's quite equally as important. So my proudest professional achievement to date, I would say, would be qualifying as an RVN. So there's a huge veterinary nurse community and veterinary community on social media, which is really helpful. But actually getting my post-nominals as an RVN was probably the highlight of my career, because I knew how hard it took me to get there. I didn't pass my exams first time, and there was hiccups along the road. So it was a long journey. So to get my badge and certificate, which this is the RVN badge that you get when you qualify, it's quite a unique badge to wear. So yeah, that was quite nice. And also I recently got elected onto the British Veterinary Nursing Association Council, which is the voice of the veterinary nurses profession. So we put ideas forward to the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons to try and progress our profession. So the RVN profession is it's quite amazing, really. It opens so many doors once you qualify. You don't have to just work in a clinical practice setting. You can do it near enough anything. You can work as a representative for a drug company and sort of go around to the practices or products and things like that. You can become a lecturer to lecture for students, to allow them to qualify, and also providing CPD, which is something I've recently started in doing. So I'm in the process of creating some webinars for qualified nurses to extend their skills in practice so they can get the most out of their qualification as possible. So yeah. So skills and knowledge essential for the role. I'd say the biggest one, which I touched on earlier, is knowing what we actually do within a veterinary practice. So I've typically put a picture of me cuddling a puppy there who wasn't very well. But like I say, it isn't all happy sort of days, unfortunately, as I'm sure many people are aware of. You also need a massive passion for animal health and welfare, because that is obviously the like overarching aim of what we do. So everything we do is in the best interest of the animals and the welfare. But you obviously can get very tricky days and sort of tricky people to deal with. Unfortunately, a lot of it is emotional that comes with it. So it's not always targeted at you personally, but it can be an emotional area to work within. And also working in a pressured environment, especially in the emergency and critical care aspect of things. So we never know what's going to come in, and we could have sort of several things going on all at once. So the ability to work under pressure is quite a necessity, I would say. So as a teenager, I wish I knew that the veterinary nursing profession is not to be intimidated, because it is a highly female dominated profession. So myself being a male vet nurse is quite a rarity. So regardless of who you are, go for what you want to do, because otherwise you'll always regret it. So I was always at school taking the mickey out of because I wanted to be a vet nurse and because I was a boy. It was something that I was frequently targeted with, along with the fact that I play a sport called bowls, which is classed as an old person sport. So I would say me playing bowls and people taking the mick, and I've achieved some quite good things in the bowls world, but I knew that I could do that. So I knew that people taking the mickey out of me wanted to be a vet nurse. I knew that I could also achieve that if I achieved the things in the bowls world that they took the mickey out of as well. So yeah. So you can find out more about getting into the vet nurse industry, because I could talk about it for absolute hours and I've probably missed quite a lot of things as well. But the British Veterinary Nursing Association website is the profession's voice and the main sort of arm of veterinary nursing, underneath the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons Act. So check out both of those websites. Also, I've got my social medias, which I'm more than happy for people to contact me on to help them if they want to know how to sort of pursue a career in veterinary nursing. But I would say work experience is the biggest thing, and trying to get into a practice just to see what goes on and gain some knowledge and experience of what goes on the inside. So people are more than allowed to contact me on social media as well. So next slide, please.
I'm gonna jump in before your next slide, if that's all
know you
right.
are.
Yeah, so I wanted to give you a chance to get to that point, because I think some of the questions may have been answered with some of the stuff you said, but I think you've had a little bit of an eye on the comments. Been lots and lots of questions, so I thought we'd try and maybe pick up a few now, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
So if we go back, I think you dealt with it a little bit, but Darren, she made a very good point. Like, how do you cope with the emotional side? And you said it was, but I wonder if there's any particular ways that you deal with that.
Yeah, so I'd say the worst thing is when you have a heavily involvement with a particular patient, and if it doesn't work out how you want it to, because a lot of the time they can be very obviously sick. So coping with the emotional side is the main thing I always try and tell myself, is that anything we do is being done for the right reasons. So if someone does bring their animal in to be put down, you're doing it for the right reasons. It is to stop suffering. So I know there's a big debate in the human thing about obviously euthanasia of people and stuff like that, and stop people suffering. So we are quite lucky in the animal industry that is something that we can do humanely, although it is very difficult, and sometimes we all do have to go into a room and have a little cry and sort ourselves out and things like that. So yeah, it can be difficult, but also having a good support network of who you work with, and also having something that you can go home to take your mind off work, so that you're not constantly thinking of work all the time. So yeah.
And
sorry, after you, Lawrence.
Is it on the same question? Because I've got another one, so it's up to you. You carry on then if there's an extension to that.
I was just going to sort of give you the flip side of that, which was Shannon asked, what was your most rewarding experience, which is probably the flip side of what we just talked about.
Ooh, there's probably quite a lot, actually, to be fair. The one that springs to mind initially is a dog that we had brought in, and it was when I was a student, actually, at my old practice. And the lady brought it in, it was choking on a biscuit, she said. So I brought it through to the room, had a look over it until I could get a vet to come and do a further clinical exam. Couldn't really see a lot wrong with it, but I always will get a vet to check just in case there is something going on. The vet came down to check. Nothing really was going on. She wasn't too concerned. Within 30 seconds of the vet checking over the dog started to choke completely on the biscuit and couldn't breathe, went blue. And in terms of its mucous membrane, so its lips and everything went blue, and its heart stopped completely. So it was then rushed down to the back, and we had to perform a series of procedures to try and get an airway. And long story short, the dog came back to life. The dog had died on the table, essentially, and just everything had stopped. So the dog came back to life and continues to do very well. And I actually hear from the owners regularly for them to let me know how it's doing, which is really nice. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Actually, if a follow-up from Shannon was then, do you think being a veterinary nurse is more rewarding than a vet?
Tricky question. Not being a vet, I don't know. It is a regular thing that I get assumed that I am a vet because I'm male. So it's quite awkward when I walk into a room with a female vet and the client will start speaking to me because they assume that I'm the vet, and then I have to tell them I'm the nurse, not the vet. But both obviously play a very important role in terms of what we do on a daily basis. I'd say we get probably the funner part of it. We get the part where we can actually spend time with the animal, and it's a bit more of a holistical approach in nursing patients and stuff, rather than the vet needs to make a clinical diagnosis and pick what medications it's going on and things like that. So I say we probably get the nicer part where we get to spend more time hands-on with the patients. So yeah.
I've got one more, Lawrence, one more, and then you can pick up, if that's all right, which is Louisa's question, which I thought was quite interesting, around like, are you scared of any particular animals? Have you got colleagues that are? And yeah, she's just wondering about if that's something that's common.
That's what I was.
It is something I hear. Yeah, I do hear that quite a lot, actually. I also hear quite a lot of vets who are scared of cats, which is quite bizarre, because it is like an animal we see on a daily basis, more so than some of the other ones. I myself am absolutely petrified of spiders. So if someone brought their pet tarantula in, I would run a mile out of the building. But in terms of anything else, you could bring a snake in, I'd be absolutely fine. But I work in a large enough team that in terms of if someone is scared of an animal, we're able to jig it around so someone else can see it who's more confident in seeing different species and stuff like that. So yeah. And
just one last question before we bring the guests back on, is this question. Is where can you start your career? Please, I'm just extremely confused and not sure where to go.
Okay, so first of all, I'd have a look on in terms of the BVNA website, which is the best. That's the voice of the profession. So they sort of specifically help with people who want to get into the profession and sort of becoming a student. The first thing I would try and do would be to write around to all the local vet practices in the area. What you can then do is try and get work experience, ideally. Maybe they might invite you in to sort of have a bit of a chat initially first. Though some places tend to do like interview processes for work experience placements now, because they are quite few and far between, unfortunately. But I struggled with it. But the main thing is perseverance. So every few months to send them emails around to the practices, write a letter, pop in to go and see them yourself, mainly them seeing you as well, and keep turning up and sort of persevering to try and get into a practice initially. You'll then start to see what goes on, and that experience will be absolutely invaluable to then pursue a career into veterinary nursing or the veterinary sector in general. So having that experience, if a practice sees that written down, then instantly you'd sort of one up on someone else who potentially hasn't. But getting that experience in the first place can be tricky. Once you're then in the practice, there'll obviously be vet nurses there who can then speak to you about where they're trained in the local area, and sort of feed off of all their knowledge that they've got there as well. So that'll just give you a major head start.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jack. I think we're going to bring the guests back on. Jack, just want to say a big thank you for your presentation, and also being patient. We were not disappointed at all. So thank you. So I'm just going to bring our other guests back on. So I'm going to bring Dean back on, and then bring Theresa back on as well. And just before we take questions or pose some questions to you guys, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for giving up your time. I know time is precious, and I know the students who are watching this, or young people, should I say, who are watching this, are really grateful. And I've also had messages from teachers on Twitter as well saying this is really informative and this is what the students need. So guys, you're making a real change and actively getting engaged in the community. So really happy about that. But yeah, there's my soppy moment for that. I'm going to get to the questions. So one of the things that I think maybe young people would like to know is, how do you recover from, in quotes, failures? Anyone can take that one.
Okay, I'll go. I know it sounds so cliche, is to learn from them. I don't even like to see things as a failure, because if you learn from it, right, have you really failed? You're not going to get everything right in life. Don't let anyone tell you. And I think we also need to change the way how we even describe the word failure, because I don't, obviously you're not going to get things right, but what is failing if you learn from it? So that's all I would say. If you do fail, if what you deem fail, just write down what went good and what you can learn from it, and what can you do next time so this situation isn't repeated. And that's essentially it. It happens. You can't change it, right? So all you can take is the lesson and do better next time.
Absolutely. There was one thing that I actually say to my students is that what is the difference between failure and failing? And they used to look at me really confused. And failure, I used to say, is when you've completely given up and you don't want to go again. In terms of failing is actually getting up and keep on going as well and learning from that process, because it's evolving. You're keeping on and going back at it. So I think that's really important there.
I think just to echo everything Theresa said, I completely agree. Learn from it. And the other thing I would say is just don't be afraid of it. We all do things, we get little things wrong on a daily basis. You can't get hung up on it so long as you take it, think about why it went wrong, what you would do differently next time, and then move on. We've definitely built a society where failure is this big bad thing. I like what you said about like redefining it. And it shouldn't be that. It is a normal part of any kind of process. Anyone that has ever invented anything didn't just invent it, right? Like the light bulb didn't just come into being one time from the moment it was first invented. You know, James Dyson didn't just draw a picture of the best Hoover ever and then make it, right? It took lots of iteration. He failed multiple times over before he saw the success that he has now. And so just embrace it and think of it just as part of a process as you move through your career and life and own it.
Absolutely.
I'd echo all that as well, just to quickly chip in as well and use it as like experience. So we often get things wrong fairly often as well, but tend to be when you get it wrong, you don't then do it again. So using that as the experience and turn it into a positive. And sometimes you have to laugh about when things go wrong, because otherwise you will just give up. There's plenty of times when I could have given up when things get tough, but perseverance and using them as experience and knowledge is the best way forward. So
100%.
There's a culture you can take into failing as well, isn't there? And I imagine maybe for Jack more than anyone else, obviously you know, in the medical and sort of veterinary industries, you can't blame, you can't be blameful of failure. You've got to sort of see that as an opportunity to learn from it all the time, because that's how the profession moves forward.
Yeah, definitely. We'll often have massive discussions if something hasn't completely gone how everyone thought it might do, and often them discussions or something going wrong prevents it going wrong 100 times over again. So taking it and like flipping it into a positive, getting everyone on board, and then changing things for better for something going wrong. If nothing ever went wrong, nothing would ever change. So things going wrong do equal in bigger success. So
I think we'll take 2 more questions, Ben, because I am aware of the time, and we've actually run over by a whole half an hour. So again, thank you for you guys being patient. It's just that the people were getting a lot from your talks. So Ben, is there a question that jumps out at you that you'd like to present?
I mean, I've got sort of one from Shannon, which was directed at Jack about where is it worth a good degree or a diploma? But then I think there's a wider question around qualifications. People have been asking all day about what GCSEs did you get? What A-levels did you get? And I think one theme I found is that for many of the careers that have been spoken about, there isn't necessarily a set of qualifications. I think Jack, again, would be slightly different. There are definitely some things you want veterinary nurses to have in order to do things properly. So I might let you answer that one directly, Jack, for that. But maybe we can pick up with the other speakers about that qualification discussion.
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say there's a sort of one that makes it better than the other. I personally done the diploma because that's what I wanted to do. But both of them will get you to where you want to be. So it completely depends on what you're looking for to get out of it. Some people prefer to do the degree because they get some more letters after their name. So it completely depends on what you actually want out of it. But it also, by doing the degree, you kind of open yourself up to them being able to progress onto further then qualifications afterwards. As I've done the diploma, I still can do further qualifications now anyway. That doesn't stop me, but it just has to be accredited by the RCVS in terms of being able to carry it out to be where you want to be. But I wouldn't say either one makes you a better or worse nurse by taking either pathway.
Yeah, and then Dean and Theresa, in terms of qualifications, I saw questions coming in about what qualifications will they need to do what you do. And I think to some extent, both of you, your qualifications didn't directly lead to the work that you do. Dean, you may
You're on
need to
mute.
repeat yourself.
Sorry, I think, do what feels right at the time that you're doing it. For me, when I was leaving college, I didn't feel like university was the right step at that moment in time. In hindsight, do I wish that I went to university and got a degree? In some ways, yes. But I also like the flexibility that I could now go and do a degree now too, right? And retrain into something different if I wanted to. The biggest thing for me is just to know that the qualifications that you get don't define you. And we live in a world now where you can retrain and move between careers. And I think that is really exciting. Perhaps we have parents or members of our family who found a career and they settled on it and did that for their whole life. You still have that option now, by the way, if that's something you want to do. But actually, it's very easy now to flex and change and go and do a degree with the Open University, take some professional certificates through companies with online courses and so on. So do what you need to do right now, do what feels right and what's interesting. And I think generally pieces will fall together. I think there are exceptions for some careers. Listening to Crystal earlier and being a lawyer, there's a lot of time that needs to go into that. But even then, there's nothing to stop you training later in life and putting the hours and the time in to get the certificates, degrees you need to go down that career route.
I'm just going to go in for this last question for the day. And it follows on from, you've got your degree, you've got your professional qualification. But to our viewers, how do you then stand out from the crowd? Go for Theresa.
I would say work experience. Definitely, so the degree that I did, it was compulsory to do a year's worth of work experience, and I did that year at Microsoft. So when I left uni, when I was competing with other students, I already had a year under my belt of professional experience. So that definitely helped. And at the time, Microsoft was a prestigious company. So I would say work experience, absolutely more than anything else. And then when you go in and you are doing this work experience, don't see it as work experience, because those people and connections can help you get further jobs. They can act as references. So when you do go and do this work experience, make sure you get there early. Make sure you're not, playing around on the computer, taking it as a joke. Take it serious, because you may even get offered a job at the end of it. So definitely work experience for me anyway. That's what I'd say.
Definitely. Jack, anything to add to
I'd
that?
say that's probably the biggest thing in terms of the veterinary industry as well, is the work experience and the knowledge behind you. And also, like Theresa said, is getting to know them people who you're working with, because everyone knows everyone in the veterinary community as well. So if they value how good you are and how much you want the job and sort of your dedication to it, they will get talking, and they know people who work at other practices in the local area. But then it's a sort of case of selling yourself and obviously trying to make yourself stand out in there. I know Dean said I'm very similar in talking about myself and trying to sell myself to people. I find quite difficult, but it is a case of trying to do that. And if you've got any particular interest in certain aspects, like mine is sort of reptiles and exotics, which a lot of people don't see, and they don't see people who have the interest in it. So that probably helps me to stand up a bit. But, yeah.
I think for me, it's a similar thing. I don't necessarily have work experience. I didn't have work experience in what I'm specifically doing now, but I've done a lot of different things that have given me different skills. And I think it's about, when it comes to finding a job that you then want to do, working out how those skills link to that job. What about the customer service skills that I picked up when I was doing retail work fit with the program management role that I do now? And also, from what Jack and Theresa just both said about work experience, it's just building a network, not being afraid to kind of chat to people, let them know who you are, like what you might be interested in. Don't be afraid to email. Like if you want to be a veterinary nurse, email a local vets, right? And see if they will let you come in for a day to shadow something that's happening. Ultimately, the worst thing that people will say is no. And that's okay. You can email someone else, but I would look around for events, like more things like this. Connect with everyone that you've seen today that you're interested, that you have a similar career interest in, and keep in touch with them, keep them up to date. Like these are all people that will know other people that will be able to help connect you as well. And Ben and I actually have started a podcast, and we did an interview recently where someone said your network is your net worth. And that's really stuck with me, because if you can have those conversations and just keep these people kind of in the wings and lean on them and ask them for advice when you need it, I think it can be really powerful. And you'll have the opportunity to do the same for other people further down the line as well, right? You know, always pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
Really agree with that. Thanks for that, Dean. And I'm just going to echo that about networking. I think it's so important, and that's something I only realized a bit later on in my adult life, because there is that fear of approaching someone. And even if you're at an event and you're saying hi, it's like they might turn and go, I don't know you. So I think the earlier we kind of get out of that mode, the more it benefits you as well. There's one more question, and then I will let you go, guys, I promise. And what was the biggest barrier in all your professions?
Yeah, I need some thinking.
I thought that was a good one.
I'll go
I would
first.
say mine was. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Jack. Go for it.
Are you sure? I'd say mine would be finding the practice to support you through your training, because obviously it takes the practice quite a lot of time and effort, and also money for them to train you as a student vet nurse, because obviously things will go wrong and you might use equipment a bit more to get your training qualification. They also have to dedicate a member of staff to be your clinical coach. So it can be quite a big thing for a practice to take on a student vet nurse. So the biggest barrier is finding that supportive practice to put you through it.
The biggest barrier that stands out to me through all the work I've done is when I first started at the school. So I mentioned earlier, I was employed as an unqualified teacher. I was an instructor. And so there was definitely people were cynical about me being able to come in and teach a class of students. And if anything, that actually just motivated me to work even harder and prove to everyone that I could do it. And that first time then that we had Ofsted come and visit and watch a lesson, and I was scored good in the lesson, like that felt good. The biggest barrier for me was probably proving myself at that point that I can operate at this level. I can do the things that perhaps you think I can't. And I'll prove it to you by really working hard to make it happen.
Thank you.
And I think just to finish off, the biggest barrier I think for me is I didn't know you needed to kind of sell yourself. I just thought someone in the work would do it for you, and that's how you get promoted. So some jobs I stayed in there longer than I needed to be because I was waiting for someone to kind of pull me up. So even if you don't like it, you need to get good at selling yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to progress as quickly as you would like.
Thank you, Theresa. I think that's really important. That all that's left for me to do is to say thank you to all of you. I'm sure the audience got loads of information from you. I certainly found it useful. We will share your socials again. A big thank you, and see you again next year, I think. I've been doing that to everyone. All right, thank you, guys. Have a good evening. Thanks.
Bye.
Right.